The afternoon of December 7th, 1941. A German Wehrmacht lieutenant, recently transferred from the Eastern Front to a rest posting in Belgium, sat in a cramped briefing room studying intelligence reports on American equipment. The documents were incomplete, mostly second-hand accounts from Luftwaffe pilots who had encountered American aircraft over occupied France. One section caught his attention, a note about American heavy machine guns, caliber 12.7 mm, designated M2 Browning. The note was brief, almost dismissive, used primarily as aircraft armament, effective against lightly armored targets at close range, anti-aircraft capable. The lieutenant, whose name was Klaus Becker, filed the information away without much thought. Heavy machine guns were aircraft weapons. That was how warfare worked. Large-caliber automatic weapons belonged on fighters and bombers where their weight could be justified. They were too heavy for ground use, too cumbersome for infantry, too ammunition-intensive for sustained operations. The Germans had their own 13mm MG-131 for aircraft. The British had their .5-inch Vickers. The Americans had this Browning. All served the same role. All made sense in the context of aerial combat. None had any business on the ground. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you're watching from today. 2 years later, Becker would learn that his assumptions about the Browning 50 caliber were catastrophically wrong. He would learn this on a dirt road in Sicily, watching American half-tracks destroy 3 German armored cars from 600 yards. He would learn this watching the 50 caliber rounds punch through armor plates that were supposed to stop anything smaller than an anti-tank gun. He would learn this as his understanding of American military doctrine shattered against the reality of a weapon that German intelligence had dismissed as only for aircraft. The M2 Browning 50 caliber machine gun entered American service in 1933. Its development began near the end of the First World War, when General John Pershing, commanding the American Expeditionary Forces, identified a critical gap in American firepower. German forces had introduced the Junkers JI, an armored ground attack aircraft whose steel plating rendered standard rifle caliber machine guns ineffective. American fighters, equipped with 30 caliber guns, could pour fire into the Junkers and watch their bullets bounce off. Pershing requested a weapon capable of penetrating aircraft armor. He specified minimum requirements: caliber of at least 0.5 inches, muzzle velocity of at least 2,700 feet per second, enough striking power to defeat armored targets. John Moses Browning took his 30 caliber M1917 machine gun and scaled it up. Winchester developed the cartridge, initially adding a rim for potential anti-tank rifle use. Pershing insisted on rimless ammunition for machine gun feeding. The first 50 caliber prototype began trials in October 1918, 1 month before the armistice. The original design fired fewer than 500 rounds per minute, with a muzzle velocity of 2,300 feet per second, insufficient for armor penetration. The Germans provided the solution. American forces captured Mauser M1918 T-Gewehr anti-tank rifles chambered in 13.2 mm. The German ammunition achieved 2,700 feet per second and could penetrate 1 inch of armor at 230 meters. Winchester studied the captured rounds and improved the 50 caliber design to match that performance. By 1921, Browning had produced the M1921 water-cooled 50 caliber machine gun. The weapon was effective but impractical. With its water jacket and cooling system, it weighed 121 pounds. Empty without water, it still weighed 79 pounds. Throughout the 1920s and early 30s, Army ordnance officers refined the design. They developed an air-cooled heavy barrel version that eliminated the water jacket. The M2 heavy barrel, designated M2HB, weighed 84 pounds, still heavy but manageable. For aircraft use, they developed the AN-M2, a lightweight version with a shorter barrel and reduced weight of 61 pounds. The aircraft version fired 600 to 800 rounds per minute. The heavy barrel ground version fired 400 to 550 rounds per minute. The 50 BMG cartridge Browning machine gun became standard. In its armor-piercing configuration, It was required to completely penetrate 0.875 inches of hardened steel armor plate at 100 yards. At 547 yards, it had to penetrate 0.75 inches. These were not aspirational specifications. These were minimum requirements. Production ammunition exceeded them. American doctrine assigned the M2 to multiple roles: aircraft armament, anti-aircraft defense, vehicle-mounted weapons, infantry support. The gun's versatility came from its ammunition: ball rounds for personnel, armor-piercing for vehicles, armor-piercing incendiary for aircraft and fuel tanks, tracer rounds for observation. A single weapon system could engage any target from infantry to light armor to low-flying aircraft. By 1941, when the United States entered World War II, the M2 was standard equipment throughout American forces. Fighters carried 4, 6, or 8 AN-M2 guns in their wings. P-47 Thunderbolts had 8. P-51 Mustangs had 6. F-4U Corsairs had 6. Bombers bristled with M2s in turrets and waist positions. B-17 Flying Fortresses mounted 13. Ground vehicles carried the M2HB for anti-aircraft and ground fire. M4 Sherman tanks had an M2 on a ring mount. Half-tracks mounted 1 or 2. Jeeps could carry 1. 2.5-ton trucks could mount them. The M2 was everywhere in the American military. German intelligence knew this. German intelligence had studied American equipment extensively. They had captured documents. They had interrogated prisoners. They had examined wrecked aircraft. They knew about the .50 caliber Browning. What they did not understand was how Americans intended to use it. German military doctrine divided weapons into categories. Rifle caliber machine guns, 7.92 mm, were infantry weapons. The MG-34 and MG-42 served this role. Heavy machine guns existed primarily for aircraft. The 13 mm MG-131 was a Luftwaffe weapon, not a Wehrmacht weapon. For anti-aircraft defense on the ground, Germans used 20 mm cannons. The Flak 30 and Flak 38 provided light anti-aircraft coverage. For engaging lightly armored vehicles, Germans used anti-tank rifles or the 20 mm cannon. The idea of using a 13 mm machine gun against ground vehicles seemed inefficient. Why use a heavy machine gun when a 20 mm cannon was more effective? This logic was sound in the context of German tactical doctrine. German forces expected to face Soviet, British, and French equipment. Soviet armor was thick on T-34s and KV-1s. British Matildas had 50 millimeters of armor. Against these targets, a heavy machine gun was pointless. You needed anti-tank guns or larger cannons. Heavy machine guns made sense in aircraft where weight savings and rate of fire mattered. On the ground, cannons were superior. German intelligence officers examining American equipment reports reached a logical conclusion. The Americans used .50 caliber machine guns for aircraft and anti-aircraft work, just like everyone else. The weapons appeared on ground vehicles because Americans liked to mount anti-aircraft guns on trucks. Nothing unusual, nothing concerning. This assessment appeared in Wehrmacht intelligence summaries distributed to unit commanders in 1942. American heavy machine guns, caliber 12.7 mm, primarily aircraft armament, also used in anti-aircraft role on vehicles. Effective against light targets. No special tactical significance. Klaus Becker, now a captain commanding a company in the 29th Panzer Grenadier Division, read similar assessments in 1943 as his unit prepared for a deployment to Sicily. American forces had landed in North Africa in November 1942. German units fighting there reported encounters with American equipment. The intelligence summaries noted American reliance on firepower. American units had substantial artillery support. American infantry carried more automatic weapons than German infantry. American air support was extensive. The reports mentioned American vehicles mounting .50 caliber machine guns, but characterized them as anti-aircraft weapons. Becker's company had fought in Russia. They knew Soviet equipment. T-34 tanks with sloped armor, KV-1 heavy tanks nearly impervious to German tank guns, Soviet infantry with PPSH submachine guns, Soviet artillery that fired preparatory bombardments lasting hours. They knew British equipment from reports, Matilda tanks, Churchill tanks, Valentine tanks, all heavily armored, most armed with modest guns. The British fought methodically, with careful preparation and strong artillery support. American equipment was new to most German officers. Americans had Sherman tanks. Intelligence reports said the Sherman had 76mm frontal armor, later models up to 90mm, on the glaciers. The gun was 75mm, adequate but not exceptional. The Sherman was faster than German tanks, more reliable but not heavily armored. American half-tracks were lightly armored trucks, useful for transporting infantry but not combat vehicles in the same sense as German Hanomag half-tracks. The American doctrine appeared to emphasize mobility and firepower over armor protection. Sherman tanks relied on speed and numbers rather than thick steel. American infantry used trucks and half-tracks for mobility rather than foot marches. Everything was motorized. Everything moved quickly, but lightly armored, vulnerable to proper anti-tank weapons. The intelligence seemed straightforward. Americans compensated for mediocre armor with volume of fire and mobility. Standard doctrine applied. Engage American vehicles with anti-tank guns and Panzerfausts. Their light armor would not withstand proper anti-tank weapons. Use machine guns against their infantry. Use artillery for preparation. Nothing unusual. Nothing that required special tactical adaptation. In July 1943, Becker's company landed in Sicily as part of the German forces, reinforcing Italian defenses. Allied forces had invaded on July 10th. British and Canadian forces pushed up the eastern coast toward Messina. American forces under General Patton advanced through central Sicily. The terrain was difficult. Mountains, narrow roads, small villages, built on hilltops. Defensive positions were strong. A few men with machine guns could hold a position for hours. The Italians were collapsing. Entire divisions surrendered or melted away. German units bore the weight of defense. Becker's company was assigned to hold a crossroads village northeast of Gela. The position controlled 2 roads leading inland from the coast. American forces would have to pass through to continue their advance. The company had 2 SDKFZ 222 armored cars, 4-wheeled reconnaissance vehicles with 20mm autocannons, and 8mm machine guns. Armor was 8mm on the hull front, 5mm on the sides. Light armor sufficient against rifle fire and shell splinters. Not meant to fight tanks. Meant for reconnaissance, light patrol work, engaging unarmored vehicles and infantry. The armored cars positioned themselves on a ridge overlooking the main road. Good fields of fire. Clear sightlines for 600 meters down the road. Infantry dug in around the village. Anti-tank guns positioned to cover the approaches. Standard defensive setup. Wait for American armor. Engage with anti-tank guns. Use the armored cars to suppress American infantry and destroy soft-skinned vehicles. July 19th. Mid-morning, dust plumes on the southern horizon. Vehicles approaching. Becker observed through binoculars. American column. 3 M3 half-tracks leading. Troops visible in the cargo beds. Behind them, trucks. Supply vehicles. No Sherman tanks in sight. The American column moved steadily up the road. No reconnaissance element ahead. No advanced scouts. Just the half-tracks moving at steady speed. Tactically careless. The Americans were either confident or inexperienced. The lead half-track reached the kill zone. Becker ordered his anti-tank gun to fire at the trucks, save the anti-tank round for armor, use the armored cars to destroy the half-tracks. The 8mm machine guns could perforate thin armor easily at this range. The 2 SDKFZ-22s opened and fire. 8mm rounds lashed out toward the American half-tracks. Tracers streaked across the 600 meters. The American column reacted instantly. The half-tracks did not stop. They did not turn around. They fanned out. Each half-track pivoted slightly, presenting an angled profile, and then all 3 opened fire with 50 caliber M2 Browning machine guns. Becker watched through his binoculars as the Brownings fired. The sound was distinctive, deeper than the German MG-42. Slower rate of fire, but each round carried enormous energy. The first burst hit the lead German armored car. Becker saw the impacts, not ricochets, not sparks skating off armor. The rounds punched through. The 8mm armor on the SDKFZ-22 hull offered no resistance. At 600 meters, the 50 caliber armor-piercing rounds penetrated effortlessly. The armored car's commander attempted to reverse. Too late. The American gunner tracked the vehicle, adjusting fire. A 3-second burst. The rounds walked up the armored car's hull, found the turret ring, penetrated. The vehicle's thin turret armor was meaningless. Smoke poured from the hatches. The crew bailed out. 30 seconds had elapsed since the first shot. The second German armored car tried to reposition, moving backward to find cover behind the ridge. An American gunner on the second half-track engaged. The range was longer now, nearly 700 meters. It did not matter. The 50 caliber rounds reached across that distance with enough energy to penetrate. The rounds hit the armored car's side as it turned. The 5mm side armor was tissue paper. The vehicle shuddered, slewed sideways, stopped. Another crew abandoning their vehicle. Becker realized he was watching something unprecedented. The American half-tracks were not running. They were not seeking cover. They were attacking with machine guns, heavy machine guns that German intelligence had said were for anti-aircraft work, except these machine guns were destroying armored vehicles at ranges where machine guns were supposed to be ineffective. The engagement lasted 3 minutes. The American half-tracks suppressed the German infantry positions with 50 caliber fire. Rounds that hit stone walls did not ricochet, they punched through. Rounds that hit trenches created showers of dirt and rock. The sheer kinetic energy was overwhelming. German infantry could not return effective fire. Anyone who raised their head to shoot met 50 caliber rounds that turned cover into shrapnel. The American column moved through. The half-tracks had not slowed. They had engaged, destroyed the German armored cars, suppressed the infantry, and continued their advance, all in 3 minutes. With machine guns, not artillery, not tank guns, not airstrikes, machine guns. That evening, Becker wrote his after-action report. He described the engagement. He noted that American half-tracks carried heavy machine guns capable of penetrating light armor at extended ranges. He recommended that units encountering American motorized columns should not attempt to engage with light armored vehicles. The 50 caliber weapons were too effective. His report went to division headquarters, from there to Corps, from Corps to Wehrmacht intelligence. It was not the first such report. Similar encounters were happening across Sicily. German reconnaissance units were discovering that their SDKFs 222 and SDKFs 232 armored cars could not safely engage American vehicles. The 50 caliber Brownings outranged German 8mm machine guns and could penetrate armor that was supposed to be proof against anything smaller than 20mm cannon. Wehrmacht intelligence updated their assessments. American 12.7mm machine guns were more effective against armored vehicles than previously estimated. Commanders should exercise caution when engaging American motorized units with light armored vehicles. The assessment was accurate. It was also insufficient. German intelligence was learning that the 50 caliber was dangerous to light armor. What they had not yet discovered was its effectiveness against heavier targets. That lesson would come in Italy, in France, in encounters where German tank crews discovered that American infantry could threaten Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs with nothing more than a machine gun. The early Panzer III variants, the most common German medium tank through 1942, had armor vulnerable to the 50 caliber. The AOSF, E, F, and G models had 30mm of armor on the hull sides. The hull rear was 20mm. These specifications were designed against rifle-caliber weapons and shell splinters. 30mm would stop machine gun fire. 20mm in the rear was acceptable because tanks were not supposed to be shot. From behind, the 50 caliber armor-piercing round could penetrate 26mm of homogeneous armor at point-blank range. At 100 meters, 25mm. At 500 meters, 19mm. These numbers meant that a 50 caliber machine gun could penetrate a Panzer III's rear armor at any combat range. The side armor was vulnerable at close range, and the specifications were for perpendicular impact. At angles, penetration decreased. But tanks in combat rarely presented perfect perpendicular surfaces. They moved turned angled. Side shots at oblique angles were common. Rear shots as tanks maneuvered were frequent. The 50 caliber created a tactical problem German tankers had never faced. Infantry with machine guns could threaten tanks. German doctrine did not account for this. Infantry carried rifles, machine guns, and Panzerfausts. Panzerfausts had limited range, 80 meters maximum. Beyond that range, infantry could not harm tanks unless they had anti-tank guns. Tanks could drive past infantry positions with relative safety as long as infantry did not have anti-tank weapons. The 50 caliber changed this calculus. American infantry dug in with 50 caliber machine guns could engage German armor at 300 to 500 meters. At those ranges, hits on the side or rear could penetrate. German tank commanders had to treat American infantry positions with heavy machine guns the same way they treated anti-tank gun positions. Avoid if possible. Suppress with artillery if necessary. Do not drive within range. This was not how machine guns were supposed to work. Machine guns suppressed infantry. Tanks suppressed machine guns by driving toward them, forcing the crew to abandon the guns or die. The 50 caliber reversed this relationship. German tank commanders who attempted to suppress American 50 caliber positions discovered their tanks getting hit. The rounds did not always penetrate frontal armor, but they created spalling on the interior, they damaged vision ports, they penetrated thinner armor sections around the gun mantlet, and they absolutely could penetrate if the tank presented its side or rear. German tankers began giving American 50 caliber positions the same respect they gave anti-tank guns. This was psychologically dislocating. A machine gun that forced tank commanders to maneuver carefully was not supposed to exist. In Italy, September 1943, Wehrmacht units defending the Volturno line encountered American forces pressing northward from Naples. One engagement illustrated the 50 caliber's effectiveness. A German Panzer III Ausf. The improved model with 50 millimeters of frontal armor and 30 millimeters on the sides was supporting infantry defending a river crossing. The tank provided fire support from a defilade position behind a low hill. Good tactical position. Hull down. Only the turret exposed. Frontal armor presented to the enemy. American infantry approached the position. The Panzer III engaged with its 50 millimeter gun and coaxial machine gun. Standard procedure. Suppress the infantry, force them to withdraw or go to ground. The American infantry had a 50 caliber M2 mounted on a salvage tripod. Heavy, difficult to move, but devastating once positioned. The American gun crew set up behind Stonewall rubble 400 meters from the German tank. They had observed the Panzer III's position. They waited for the tank to fire. When the tank fired its main gun, the barrel recoiled. The turret shifted slightly, and for a moment the tank's profile changed. The 50 caliber crew fired a burst, 20 rounds. The burst hit the turret side at an oblique angle as the turret traversed. 30 millimeters of armor at 30 degrees deflection. Some rounds ricocheted, several penetrated. Not deep penetration. The interior spalling wounded one crew member. More importantly, the optical sights were damaged. The tank could not effectively aim. The commander ordered withdrawal. The tank reversed out of position and moved to cover. An infantry machine gun had forced a tank to withdraw. The German company commander filed a report. He noted that American heavy machine guns were capable of damaging tank optical equipment and could penetrate side armor at medium ranges. He recommended that tanks avoid prolonged stationary positions within range of American 50 caliber weapons. Such reports accumulated. Wehrmacht tactical bulletins in late 1943 and early 1944 began including warnings about American 50 caliber machine guns. Commanders should treat American heavy machine gun positions as light anti-tank weapons. Armored vehicles should avoid exposing their sides or rear to American 50 caliber fire. Light armored vehicles, anything with less than 30 millimeters of armor, should not engage American positions equipped with 50 caliber weapons except at extreme range or with fire support. The warnings were professional, factual, and reflected growing German respect for a weapon they had initially dismissed. But the warnings also revealed something German intelligence had failed to predict. American tactical doctrine did not use weapons the way German doctrine expected. Germans divided weapons into strict categories. Each weapon had a role. Machine guns suppressed infantry, anti-tank guns destroyed tanks, artillery prepared attacks, heavy machine guns belonged on aircraft. Americans did not think this way. Americans mounted 50 caliber machine guns on everything. Jeeps carried them, half-tracks carried them, trucks carried them, tank destroyers mounted them as secondary armament. Tanks had them for anti-aircraft work but used them against ground targets routinely. Infantry set them up on tripods. The gun was everywhere, and American crews used the 50 caliber against any target within range. Aircraft, obviously, but also infantry, vehicles, buildings, bunkers, machine gun nests, light fortifications. If the target was within 2,000 meters and the 50 caliber could damage it, American crews engaged. This created tactical problems for German forces. A Wehrmacht infantry company attacking an American position had to account for multiple 50 caliber positions. Each gun could engage at 1,500 meters effectively. Each gun could destroy light vehicles, suppress infantry, penetrate walls, and potentially damage tanks. American defensive positions had overlapping 50 caliber fields of fire. German forces had to suppress or destroy these guns before closing with American infantry. This required artillery or armor support. A standard German infantry assault, relying on MG-42 suppression and rapid advance, did not work against American positions with 50 caliber support. The MG-42 fired 900 to 1,500 rounds per minute with 7.92 millimeter ammunition. Excellent for suppressing infantry. The 50 caliber fired 400 to 550 rounds per minute with 12.7 millimeter ammunition. Each round carried more than 4 times the energy of a 7.92 millimeter round. The 50 caliber did not suppress through rate of fire. It suppressed through the sheer destructive power of each impact. German soldiers who had experienced both weapons described the difference viscerally. The MG-42 was terrifying because of its sound. The rate of fire was so high that individual shots blurred into a continuous roar. Anyone caught in MG-42 fire knew they had to get flat immediately or die. But if you found cover, you were relatively safe. A stone wall stopped 7.92 mm rounds. A tree trunk provided protection. A ditch offered safety. The 50 caliber was different. The sound was deeper. The rate of fire was slower. You could hear individual shots, but the impacts were catastrophic. A 50 caliber round hitting a stone wall did not just stop. It punched through, sending stone fragments as secondary projectiles. A 50 caliber round hitting a tree trunk did not embed itself. It shattered wood, creating splinters that wounded anyone nearby. A 50 caliber round hitting the edge of a ditch did not merely kick up dirt. It excavated the ditch wall, collapsing cover. One Wehrmacht veteran, interviewed after the war, described encountering American 50 caliber fire during the Italian campaign. He said, "The MG-42 made you afraid to move. The 50 caliber made you afraid to exist. If you could hear it firing nearby, you knew nothing around you would protect you. The only safety was being somewhere else entirely." This psychological effect multiplied the weapon's tactical value. German infantry, advancing against American positions with 50 caliber support, moved cautiously. They used all available cover. They waited for artillery support. They requested tank support. The presence of 50 caliber machine guns slowed German attacks, consumed time, required additional resources. This was exactly what a defensive weapon should accomplish. And American forces had a lot of 50 calibers. Production figures tell the story. From 1940 to 1945, American industry produced approximately 2 million M2 Browning 50 caliber machine guns of all variants. Nearly 350,000 were M2HB heavy barrel models for ground use. The rest were aircraft models. Every American infantry division had dozens of M2HB machine guns. Every tank battalion had them. Every motorized unit had them. American forces in Europe had thousands of 50 caliber machine guns, and ammunition production matched weapon production. American factories produced billions of 50 caliber rounds during the war. The ammunition supply never constrained operations. American gunners could fire the 50 caliber freely without worrying about conservation. If a target appeared within range, engage it. Ammunition would be resupplied. German forces did not have equivalent weapons in equivalent numbers. The 13mm MG-131 was an aircraft gun. The 15mm MG-151 was larger, but also primarily for aircraft. Neither was produced in large numbers for ground use. German forces relied on the 20mm flak for anti-aircraft and light anti-vehicle work. Effective but heavier, less mobile, lower rate of fire than the 50 caliber. More importantly, German ammunition supplies were constrained. By 1944, Allied strategic bombing had damaged German industrial capacity. Raw materials were scarce, transportation was disrupted. German units operated under ammunition rationing. Artillery batteries could fire only limited daily allotments. Machine gun crews conserved ammunition. Anti-aircraft guns fired only when targets were certain. American units had no such constraints. Ammunition flowed freely. If American gunners wanted to fire a 100-round burst to suppress a suspected enemy position, they did. If they wanted to fire 500 rounds to destroy a building that might contain snipers, they did. The psychological impact on German forces was significant. American units could afford to use firepower liberally. German units had to conserve. In any engagement, Americans could outshoot German forces simply by expending more ammunition. And the 50 caliber exemplified this approach. A single 50 caliber machine gun could fire 1,000 rounds in an engagement. That represented 23 kilograms of projectiles impacting the target area. The kinetic energy delivered was staggering. German units on the receiving end described it as similar to light artillery fire. Not in terms of explosive effect, but in terms of structural damage. Buildings hit by sustained 50 caliber fire collapsed, walls crumbled, cover disintegrated. The 50 caliber's ground role emerged from American industrial capacity and tactical philosophy. Americans could produce heavy machine guns in quantity. American vehicles could carry them. American logistics could supply the ammunition. Why not use them? German forces discovered American pragmatism the hard way, the Battle of the Bulge. In December 1944, provided the clearest demonstration. German forces launched their surprise offensive on December 16th with the advantage of weather that grounded Allied aircraft. No air support. Ground forces would fight without aerial interdiction. German commanders expected to encounter American armor and infantry without the overwhelming firepower advantage Americans usually enjoyed. They were correct about air support. They were wrong about firepower. American defensive positions throughout the Ardennes had extensive 50 caliber coverage. Every road junction, every village, every defensive strongpoint. The machine guns were positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire. German armor advancing down narrow roads encountered 50 caliber fire from multiple positions simultaneously. The rounds could not penetrate Panther or Tiger frontal armor, but they damaged tracks, vision ports, external equipment. They forced buttoned-up operations. Most critically, they destroyed the supporting infantry. German combined arms tactics required infantry to advance with tanks, clearing anti-tank positions and protecting the armor from close assault. 50 caliber fire made this impossible. Infantry attempting to advance alongside tanks were cut down at ranges exceeding 500 meters. The volume of fire was overwhelming. German infantry went to ground. Tanks continued forward without infantry support. American bazookas and anti-tank guns destroyed the unsupported tanks. The pattern repeated across the northern shoulder of the German penetration. At Elsenborn Ridge, American forces stopped multiple German armored assaults. Artillery played the primary role, but 50 caliber machine guns contributed significantly by separating German infantry from their armor. After-action reports from German units noted that American heavy machine guns created devastating crossfire that prevented infantry maneuver. Several company commanders reported being unable to coordinate infantry tank attacks because infantry could not advance through American machine gun fire. One engagement illustrated the weapon's psychological impact. A German infantry battalion attacked an American position near Butgenbach on December 20th. The attack began at dawn with artillery preparation. German infantry advanced in company strength approximately 120 men, supported by 2 Panzer IV tanks. The American position had 350 caliber machine guns positioned to cover the approaches. At 800 meters, the American machine guns opened fire, sustained fire, not short bursts. The gun crews fired continuously, walking the rounds across the German line. The 50 caliber's effective range exceeded the German infantry's ability to return fire. German soldiers could see the gun positions but could not reach them with rifle fire or MG-42 fire. They went prone, sought cover, attempted to advance by rushes. The 50 caliber fire followed them. Rounds impacted around their positions, kicking up frozen earth, splintering trees. Several rounds hit the Panzer IV's external fuel tanks, setting one tank ablaze. After 15 minutes of sustained fire, the German battalion commander ordered withdrawal. His forces had taken 30% casualties without reaching effective range of the American position. The attack had been stopped by 3 machine guns. This was not how heavy machine guns were supposed to function in defensive roles. Machine guns were meant to supplement rifle fire, provide suppressive fire during assaults, cover withdrawal. They were not supposed to stop battalion strength attacks independently. But American 50 caliber positions did exactly that. Repeatedly throughout the Bulge. German soldiers captured during the Bulge operations were interrogated about their experiences. Multiple prisoners specifically mentioned American 50 caliber machine guns as one of the most feared weapons they encountered. One Unteroffizier stated that his squad would rather face American tanks than American heavy machine guns in prepared positions. Tanks you could hide from, wait for them to pass, ambush from behind. The 50 caliber positions saw everything, reached everywhere within their field of fire, and destroyed any cover you tried to use. The Germans had thought the 50 caliber was only for aircraft. This belief cost them countless casualties, destroyed vehicles, failed attacks. By 1945, Wehrmacht veterans knew better. But knowledge came through hard experience, not through intelligence reports. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, reportedly said after the war that if German forces had possessed the Browning 50 caliber, the Battle of Britain would have turned out differently. He was referring to aircraft armament, but his comment revealed the broader lesson. The 50 caliber was a weapon system that fundamentally outperformed its intended role. Designed as an anti-aircraft gun, it became an anti-everything gun. John Moses Browning died in 1926, well before his 50 caliber design saw combat. He never witnessed American soldiers using his machine gun to stop tank attacks, destroy armored vehicles, suppress entire infantry companies. He designed an anti-aircraft weapon. American soldiers discovered they had something far more versatile. The M2 Browning remained in American service long after World War II. Korea, Vietnam, Gulf War, Iraq, Afghanistan. The weapon that German intelligence dismissed as only for aircraft proved to be irreplaceable. Modern American forces still use the M2, now approaching its centennial of service. The lesson of the 50 caliber was not about technological superiority. German weapons were excellent. German engineering was sophisticated. The lesson was about doctrine and application. Americans looked at a heavy machine gun and asked what else it could do. Germans looked at the same weapon and assumed it had one role. That difference in perspective cost thousands of German soldiers their lives and helped Allied forces maintain firepower superiority even when outnumbered or surprised. Thank you for watching. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.